Imagine being locked in a dark upper room, terrified for your life, knowing the man you gave up everything to follow has just been brutally executed. The Roman Empire wants you dead. The religious elite want you silenced. Your movement is completely crushed. But then, in a matter of hours, something so totally inexplicable happens that this exact same group of trembling, defeated men suddenly walk out into the public streets, willingly allowing themselves to be tortured, crucified, and beheaded for one single, impossible claim a dead man had come back to life. If the body of Jesus of Nazareth was simply stolen, Christianity would have vanished 2,000 years ago. But when they arrived at that heavily guarded tomb on Sunday morning, they didn't just find it empty. They found a massive 2-ton stone somehow rolled uphill, elite Roman guards completely neutralized, and burial cloths left behind in a highly specific, impossible configuration that entirely ruled out the theory of a grave robbery. So, what exactly was waiting for Mary Magdalene in the quiet of that garden? What undeniable physical evidence did a terrified skeptic named Thomas actually touch that instantly turned him into a fearless martyr? If this singular event never happened, human history is built on a lie, and the foundation of the Christian faith vanishes in an instant. But if it actually happened, it becomes the most earth-shattering and urgent reality of your entire life. To understand what really happened in those missing hours, we have to look closely at the exact historical evidence left behind inside the dark of that sealed tomb. To fully grasp the sheer impossibility of what happened on Sunday morning, you first have to understand the absolute brutal finality of Friday afternoon. The Roman Empire did not make mistakes when it came to executions. They were undisputed masters of death. When Jesus hung on the cross, he wasn't just severely injured or unconscious. The physiological evidence recorded by eyewitnesses, the spear thrust upward into his side. The sudden separated flow of blood and water proves a catastrophic medical reality: total heart failure and asphyxiation. Jesus of Nazareth was certifiably, undeniably dead. This historical fact completely destroys the modern theory that he somehow passed out from the pain and later woke up in the cool air of the tomb. But the elite religious leaders of the first century weren't taking any chances anyway. They remembered his terrifying prophecies about rising on the third day, and they demanded that the Roman governor Pilate lock the burial site down. This wasn't a shallow dirt grave in an unguarded field. The tomb belonging to Joseph of Arimathea was an impenetrable vault carved directly into solid bedrock. Across the entrance sat a massive, circular stone weighing roughly 2,000 pounds. It was deliberately rolled down a sloped groove to seal the doorway, meaning that to open it, a coordinated team of incredibly strong men would have to somehow pry a 2-ton boulder backward and uphill in the dead of night. But the stone was only the physical barrier. Across that rock, authorities stretched a cord and stamped it with the official Roman seal, carrying the full weight and authority of the emperor. Breaking that wax insignia was a federal crime punishable by instant agonizing death. And guarding that seal was a Roman custodia, a specialized, heavily armed detachment of elite soldiers. These were men who knew that falling asleep on watch carried an automatic death sentence. They were strictly disciplined, on high alert, and trained to neutralize any threat with lethal force. And who exactly was the supposed threat? A ragtag group of terrified fishermen. The disciples weren't elite commandos plotting a highly coordinated midnight heist. They were devastated, cowardly, and completely broken. Just hours earlier, their bravest leader, Peter, had sworn he didn't even know Jesus because he was terrified of a servant girl. They were hiding in the dark, behind locked doors, jumping at every shadow, fully expecting the authorities to kick the door in and execute them next. So, when Mary Magdalene and the other women walk toward the garden at dawn, they aren't expecting a miraculous triumph. They are weeping. They are carrying heavy, expensive spices to anoint a decaying corpse. Their only logical question is, who will roll the stone away for us? But when they arrive, the air is dead silent. The elite Roman guards are nowhere to be found. The 2-ton stone hasn't just been rolled away. The historical accounts indicate it was violently removed, thrown completely outside of its groove. Yet, none of this is the most shocking part. If desperate grave robbers had somehow managed to knock out a squad of Roman soldiers and move a massive boulder in the dark, they would have been in a frantic, adrenaline-fueled panic. They would have grabbed the body wrapped tightly in sticky 100-pound resin-soaked linens and fled into the night as fast as humanly possible. But when John and Peter finally run into the dark, echoing chamber, they don't find a chaotic, disturbed crime scene. They look down at the cold stone slab, and they see the heavy linen wrappings still lying there. But they aren't slashed open, violently unwrapped, or scattered across the floor. They are lying perfectly flat, sunken in on themselves, as if the physical body inside had simply vaporized and passed right through the fabric. And the separate burial cloth that had been wrapped around his head wasn't carelessly tossed aside in a rush. It was neatly folded, deliberately placed by itself at the head of the slab. You do not take the time to make the bed and fold the napkins if you are pulling off the most dangerous heist in human history. This wasn't the frenzied aftermath of a robbery. It was the undeniable, chilling signature of someone who had woken up, taken his time, and simply walked out. So, if the body wasn't stolen, where did he go? Mary Magdalene is standing outside the empty tomb, utterly shattered. Through her tears, she sees a figure standing in the morning mist. She assumes he's the gardener. Desperate, she pleads with him. "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him." She is looking directly at the greatest miracle in human history. But human logic simply refuses to process it. Then, the man speaks a single word. "Mary." It's the voice, the inflection, the unmistakable tone of the teacher she watched die 48 hours ago. In a fraction of a second, grief shatters into total, earth-shaking shock. He is alive. But Mary's eyewitness account alone wasn't going to flip the Roman Empire upside down. Why? Because first-century culture didn't consider women to be reliable witnesses. If you were inventing a massive religious hoax from scratch, you would absolutely never write a woman as your star witness. It would be PR suicide. Yet, the gospel writers recorded it anyway. Why? Because that's exactly how it happened. But the rest of the disciples, they aren't buying it. They are still barricaded in an upper room, paralyzed by fear. The doors are dead-bolted. The windows are shuttered. Suddenly, without the door ever opening, Jesus is just standing there, right in the middle of the room. He speaks, "Peace be with you." They panic. They think it's a ghost, a collective hallucination born out of severe trauma. So Jesus shuts that theory down immediately. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones. He asks for a piece of broiled fish and eats it right in front of them. Ghosts don't chew. Hallucinations don't have a functioning digestive system. This is a physical, breathing reality. Yet, one man missed the memo. Thomas wasn't in the room when the others tell him. He refuses to believe it. He draws a hard line in the sand. Unless he can physically push his own fingers into the jagged nail holes in Jesus' hands and shove his hand into the fatal spear wound in his side, he will not believe. Fast forward 8 days. Same locked room. Thomas is there. Jesus appears again. He locks eyes with Thomas. He doesn't scream at him. He offers him the exact gruesome proof he demanded. "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side." Thomas doesn't even need to touch him. The skepticism evaporates instantly. He drops to his knees and declares, "My Lord and my God." That right there, that is a psychological impossibility if the resurrection was a fabricated lie. People will lie for financial gain. They will lie for political power. They will lie for fame. But nobody willingly volunteers to be tortured to death for something they know they made up. Look at what happens next. It defies all human psychology. These exact same men who were just cowering in the dark suddenly burst out into the brutal, hyper-violent streets of Jerusalem. They stand directly in front of the very Roman officials and Jewish high priests who just murdered their leader, and they look them dead in the eye. Peter, the guy who cried because a teenage servant girl recognized him a few days ago, now stands before a massive crowd of thousands. He loudly accuses the establishment of executing the Son of God and declares that Jesus beat the grave. The authorities arrest them. They beat them raw with whips. They threaten them with crucifixion. And the disciples' response, they rejoice. They literally thank God they were considered worthy to bleed for the name of Jesus. History tells us exactly how these men met their end. Peter was crucified upside down in Rome. Paul was beheaded by Nero. Thomas was run through with a spear in India. James was stoned and clubbed to death. Every single one of them save John, who survived being boiled in oil and was exiled, went to a gruesome, agonizing grave. All they had to do to save their own lives was whisper 3 little words. It was fake. Not one of them cracked. Not one. You don't face a Roman executioner's sword with a smile for a stolen corpse. You only do that if you have looked a resurrected dead man in the eyes and realized that the grave no longer has any power. But the shockwaves didn't stop in Jerusalem. The resurrection wasn't just a spectacle for a few insiders. It fundamentally broke the rules of the universe, and it immediately spilled out onto a dusty highway known as the road to Emmaus. 2 exhausted disciples are walking away from Jerusalem, utterly crushed by the events of Friday. The movement is dead. The Messiah is gone. As they trudge along the road to Emmaus, a stranger falls into step beside them. He asks what they are discussing, and they are stunned. How could anyone in Jerusalem not know the tragedy that just happened? But this stranger doesn't just offer empty sympathy. He begins to walk them through centuries of ancient texts, unlocking prophecies, unrolling the blueprint of history, and proving that the Christ had to suffer these brutal things to enter his glory. Still, their eyes are kept from recognizing him, not until they finally sit down for dinner. The stranger takes the bread, blesses it, and breaks it. In that exact fraction of a second, the veil drops. They see the nail-scarred hands. They recognize the face. It is him. And then, instantly, he vanishes from their sight. They don't go to sleep. They don't finish their meal. They sprint 7 miles back to Jerusalem in the pitch black of night to tell the others. Why? Because in that moment, they finally understood the terrifying, magnificent cosmic scale of what had just occurred. This was never about a good moral teacher surviving a bad weekend. This was the ultimate shattering climax of the human story. When the breath returned to the lungs of Jesus of Nazareth in the freezing dark of that sealed tomb, the very fabric of reality was permanently rewritten. He didn't just cheat death, he killed it. This is the definitive answer to the ultimate open loop of human existence. Every religion, every philosophy, every empire eventually runs face first into the undefeated, terrifying reality of the grave. Death has always been the great equalizer, the absolute final period at the end of every human sentence. But Sunday morning changed the punctuation. The cross was the agonizing payment for humanity's corruption, but the empty tomb was the indisputable physical receipt. It proved that the check cleared. The impossible debt of sin was fully erased. Rome thought they had executed a radical peasant. The religious elite thought they had successfully protected their political power. They had no idea they were unwittingly participating in the exact rescue operation God had been orchestrating since the dawn of time. Jesus absorbed the full crushing weight of human evil, drank the cup of divine justice down to the absolute dregs, and emerged on the other side holding the keys to death and hell. The grave tried to consume the author of life, and it literally choked. If the bones of Jesus are still buried in a forgotten box somewhere in the Middle East, then human history is built on a massive lie. But if that 2-ton stone was actually moved, if Thomas actually touched those jagged wounds, if Peter actually ate with a dead man, if Mary actually heard him call her name, then absolutely everything changes. It means you are not wandering through a cold, meaningless universe. It means your deepest failures, your darkest secrets, and your heaviest guilt can be permanently washed away. It means the grave is no longer a dead end. It is simply a doorway. The resurrection isn't just an ancient historical anomaly to be debated. It is a living, breathing, urgent reality. The exact same explosive power that ignited inside that dark vault and violently ripped Jesus of Nazareth back into the land of the living is actively reaching out to you right now. The Roman Empire has crumbled into ruins. The elite gods are dust, but the tomb remains entirely empty. The king is alive, and the invitation to step out of the dark and into his eternal life stands forever. But stepping out of the dark is just the first movement of a much larger reality. If the empty tomb permanently rewrote the fundamental fabric of the universe, then every single page of human history and every single moment of your future must be understood through the piercing lens of that Sunday morning. Remember those 2 exhausted disciples trudging along the road to Emmaus. Jesus didn't just reveal his identity to them in the breaking of the bread. He spent hours walking them through centuries of ancient texts. He unrolled the exact historical blueprint, proving that all of this cosmic trauma and triumph was orchestrated by divine design from the very beginning. He showed them the hidden architecture of eternity, concealed in plain sight within the ancient scriptures. If you want to know exactly what Jesus revealed to them on that 7-mile walk in the dirt, if you want to uncover the specific, undeniable prophecies that predicted the crushing suffering and the explosive glory of the Messiah centuries before Rome even existed, you cannot stop here. The veil has dropped, but the full picture is just coming into focus. Click the video on your screen right now, where we break down the exact Emmaus Road mysteries that shattered their despair and ignited a world-changing movement. Click the video and let's keep walking.